How do we play aggressively against the King's Indian? Play h4. In this video, we will look at the matchup between Sam Shankland and Peter Svider. This game took place in the World Cup. So firstly, let's introduce the players. With the white pieces is Sam Shankland. He is 29. He's world number 27 from the USA. He is a former US champion. Peter Svider, he is 8-time Russian champion. This is one thing both players have in common. They've both won their national championships. Peter is 45. He's world number 33 from Russia. Shankland has white, Svider has black. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, and already a very aggressive move, h4. Bishop g7, knight c3, d6. Now, if we go back to this position, it's very well known at the highest level. Peter Svider is known for playing the Grunfeld. A very dynamic, sharp way to play with black. Now, why does Sam play h4 so early on? Because he doesn't want Peter to play the positions that he loves. The positions that he's so used to. After h4, if bishop g7, knight c3, and now you may have been asking, why not d5? It looks exactly the same. But white now has this extra option, h5. And this is the big difference. If black takes this pawn, white now takes in the center, and he's got an extra central pawn. Also, white has the h-file for the rook. Black can actually break it up with a move like e6. And then white can continue to play in this aggressive fashion. g4, knight f6, take. Bishop g2 is possible here, g5 is possible, but you can even sack a pawn with e4. And it gets very, very aggressive, very dynamic. This is a very, very interesting idea. So after h4, Peter just goes bishop g7. Normal move, knight c3, and now he goes d6. We are now into a King's Indian structure. And Peter Svider, he normally plays the Grunfeld. But Sam, what has he done? He's got his opponent out of his normal territory. e4. That's the cool thing about playing against the King's Indian. White actually gets 3 pawns in the center. And you can see the green circles. These are all the squares the pawn controls. Knight c6, you attack the center, knight e2, defend it at the same time. You don't actually want to play a normal looking move like knight f3, which defends the center, because bishop g4 is a problem. Pinning the knight to the queen. That's why knight e2 is very accurate. You can't do it here, because you just waste time. You just waste time, f3. You have to kick the bishop away. Knight e2. Castle, f3. Holding, cementing your pawn chain. So we get a King's Indian, and now this is looking like the same-ish variation. And that is 3 pawns in the middle and a pawn on f3. Black now strikes in the center with e5. Typical move in the King's Indian. d5, 2 options here. Knight e7 or knight d4 as played in the game. Knight e7, normal kind of setup with the 2 knights here, the bishop here, and this pawn structure. But it's a bit passive here. Peter goes knight d4. It looks like this loses a pawn, but that is not true. Bishop e3 was played in the game, but knight takes d4 is a blunder. You cannot grab a pawn because it's a very nice tactic on the e-file. Take, and now knight takes e4, crashing through. If you take the knight, rook e8, and you lose your queen. Very nice tactic. If we go back here, knight takes e4, the best white can do is just save the queen. But now, black just smashes his structure. Take, bishop f5. And black has a wonderful position. With 2 bishops slicing the board, rook can come to e8 with check. So after knight d4, bishop e3 played, c5. 2 pawns, holding the very strong knight in the center. That's why white has to en passant. Take. Now it really is a pawn sacrifice. It's very interesting to note, both sides have gained time. It is move 11. White has 1 hour 34, and it says black has 1 hour 33. Both sides are clearly familiar with this position. Black sacks a pawn. Take. White has won a pawn, but he is behind in development. Rook b8, you attack the pawn. Queen c2. You defend b2. Also, you defend the c4 pawn later, and you're getting ready to castle. c5, you attack the bishop. Because it is on such a wonderful diagonal, bishop comes back to f2. Now, in this position, black has the option of going knight h5, knight f4, occupying a dark square. Bishop e6 was actually played in the game, so let's quickly look at knight h5. And there are many dynamic options here for black. Let me explain. Knight can come here. This bishop is very dangerous. Rook attacks b2. This queen can also come into f6. Castle, queen a5 is possible as well, and the game goes on. Bishop e6 played. Castle. Knight d7. Peter is sacking another pawn, because rook takes d6 is now possible. But the point of moving the knight to d7 is so then it can reroute to e5. White has 1 hour 32, but now after this move, 1 hour 16. So Sam has spent 16 minutes on this capture. Rook takes d6. Queen a5. This position, it just looks so dangerous for white. 7 pawns for white, 5 pawns for black. I think black is on the attack. So difficult to play this. Bishop e1. Only move. You've got to defend your knight on c3. Knight e5. And in my opinion, this is one of the most important moves of the game, because it shuts out Peter's bishop on g7. f4. He gives a pawn back. He needs to shut out this bishop. f4 is a very good move. The engine recommends b3, which is just horrible. You open the diagonal, you defend your pawn, and this is just so difficult to play for white. Rook d8. Take. And the point of swapping off rooks is now the knight can come into b4 to d4. If we go back 2 moves, you can't play knight c6 here because there's a rook. I think b3 is disgusting. That's why here, in my opinion, f4 is probably the most important move of the game. He gives a pawn back. He has to. Look at all of white's pieces. He is so behind in development. Knight takes c4. Take, e5. You have to shut it out. Rook d8, offering a trade. I think the pressure is being reduced. The pressure is really going, and that works out for white. Take, and now h5. The point of h5 is not to open the h-file. That's the cool thing about this game. It is to get the bishop to h4, so then it actually has an active spot. But later, we're going to see the h-file open up. Bishop takes a2. Peter grabs a pawn. He grabs the a2 pawn. Take, knight e4. Nice move. Bishop attacks queen. Queen and knight attack pawn, and the knight can hop in. Queen b6 now played, which is a blunder, and unfortunately with this move, Peter goes on to lose this game. Very tense fight, a very tense battle here. One move, the better move is actually queen b5, because you control c4 or d7, which I'll explain very soon. Queen a6 is also good, because you control c4. Queen b5 is probably better because you control both. So, queen b5, let's look at this first, then we'll actually see what happened in the game. I'm going to play almost the same moves in the game, and then I'm going to show the difference. Bishop h4. Looks alright. You attack the rook. Rook d4. Knight f6 check. King f8. Bishop f2. And here's the difference. Bishop f2 is losing because rook c4 wins the queen. Now bear this in mind. Let's go back to the game. After knight e4, queen b6. Bishop h4 played. Attacking the rook, and also white has control over the f6 square. Rook d4. Rook comes in. Knight f6 check. You can't take, because take, and you lose. You lose on h8. King f8. 37 minutes for white, 26 minutes for black. And now bishop f2. And black is totally lost. The reason he's lost is because of this. If the rook, let me explain each arrow. If the rook leaves any square off the d file, then knight d7 check wins the queen. If you move the rook here, well, anywhere off the d file, bishop c5 check loses the queen. That's why the queen being on c2 was so useful, and there's no good option. After bishop f2, Peter is losing. You cannot move the rook to a good square. Rook c4, just like we saw before. Black wins the queen, but no. White also wins the queen. Check. King e7, take. And rook for a bishop up. And that's the big difference. That is the vital difference. Bishop f2. Bishop takes f6. And now, he takes f6. You can actually take the rook, but he took this. Because with this move, he's threatening mate. E takes f6 is very nice. Queen takes f6, only move to stop mate. And now, he doesn't take the rook, he takes a check first, because Sam has calculated all the way until the end. Rook d6, and one more move, and unfortunately Peter Svider is out of the World Cup. Queen c8 check, game over. If king e7, bishop h4, you win the queen. If you block with the rook, you win the rook. That's the cool thing. You can actually go rook h8 check, but check is good as well. Very nice tactical finish. Take, check, king e7, and you don't take, bishop h4 check. Now you are rook up. And that is how Peter Svider is out of the World Cup. So let's summarize this game. h4, and now we get a King's Indian structure. So same-ish, and now d5. Here's the first key moment. Peter's offering to sack a pawn, and he gives a pawn here. Compensation for black, absolutely. Very easy moves for black. c5, attack the bishop, and here we go. Knight d7, so sacking another pawn. I mean, these are all good moves from black. Sacking 2 pawns and getting active play. Sam grabs that pawn, lot of pressure, so difficult to play. Only move, you have to drop the bishop back to defend. Knight e5, and I know I said it before, but I'll say it again. This is the key moment. Got to shut out that bishop. f4, take, e5. Right, now what? Well, a pair of rooks come off. Take, black gets the d-file. h5, the second brilliant move of the game, I would say, because you get the bishop in. Grabs the pawn. Take, knight e4. And now, unfortunately, Peter blundered with queen b6. Bishop h4, check, and bishop f2. The very difficult retreating move, you could say. The bishop looks active on h4, drop it back, and it completely wins. Game over. And that's it. Queen c8 check. And Sam Shankland is through to the next round of the World Cup. By the way, here's YouTube's suggestion for what to watch next. But if you don't like that option, you might like this World Cup suggestion. Daniel Dubov's crushing victory against the Slav defense. But if you don't like that option, you might like a totally different option, a bullet video. Checkmate Carlsen in 30 seconds by Daniel Naroditsky. Thanks for watching.